Hey everyone, Shakarez here. Today I'm looking at some of the new items and changed items for Season 11, for Season 2021 that just landed on PBE. They're going live for Preseason eventually. And yeah, I decided to split this up to make this easier to digest. One thing that wasn't really covered were starting items and components. So first off, there's Doran's Blade. No longer gives lifesteal and now instead heals for 3% of damage dealt, reduced to 1% against non-champions. This is pretty cool for not only like AD casters, like for example, Kai'Sa will heal off hitting Q and W. And just abilities in general, like just healing off of damage dealt is pretty cool. This also means that AP champions with 80 scalings can use this and just heal off of their damage dealt. Gives it a bit more versatility. It doesn't really pigeonhole it into AD only because lifesteal is based on the physical damage you deal with autos. The damage you deal with autos, rather. Then we have Doran's Ring. Now this one is pretty big as far as starting items go. Plus 10 HP, but it no longer grants 5 mana per 5 seconds. Instead, killing a minion restores mana, and if you don't have mana, it restores 3 health. Now this, straight up, first thing I thought of was Vladimir, Akali, who were champions that were already using these Doran's Ring in Season 10, even though they weren't getting mana regen out of it. Now they're getting health on top of it, on top of getting 10 more flat health than they were before. So pretty nice little buff. I've laned against 2 Akalis already, or laned against one and played against another in PBE, and definitely like the earlier sustain she's getting from this item plus some other changes I think are gonna keep her viable. The other big change is tier, as it's now a starting item. So instead of 850 gold, it's now 400. It now gives less 100 mana, and it no longer gives the all passive that refunds 10% of mana spent. Instead, it gives you on-hit physical damage because starting item to help you last it. Just kind of like Cull and Doran's Ring. So yeah, starting item means that, you know, if you're Ryze, you can just start your first. You can start your lane with this. You can start with this with Ezreal. Obviously, if you start with this with Ezreal, you'll be a bit weaker as you won't have combat stats because the physical damage is only to minions, the on-hit. And the other big change is they changed how it stacks, right? So it's a bit of a slower stacker now. You no longer can just, you know, throw spells out there to stack. You're incentivized to hit champions and you need to hit enemies. So one charge per 8 seconds is also slower than three times per 12 seconds. So yeah, it's a bit slower. It's also less mana. It's 450 bonus mana instead of 750. And you can double it if you're hitting champions, so you can stack it a bit faster. And also because it's a starting item, you're naturally going to stack it up, right? The advantage, you stack earlier, you can buy it earlier. The disadvantage, less mana. Also means less mana in the game. Rip to mana scalers. I'm expecting compensation buffs to heavy mana users because tier is now like this, and Archangel is no longer CDR or ability haste item, and Rod of Ages is not in the game anymore. It's another item now. We'll talk about that in the mage itemization video. But yeah, I'm expecting compensation buffs to champions like Anivia, Kassadin, anyone who's like a really heavy mana user to get like some more base mana regen or something, or bigger mana pools. But we'll see. Other component items have been changed, such as Phage and Stinger. I won't highlight them all, but I wanted to highlight some component items as I consider the change to be rather important. The first one is Oblivion Orb. Mages can rejoice. They can now access Grievous Wounds for 800 gold like AD champions can with Executioner's Calling. This has no more health and no more flat penetration. And the full Nomicon, I believe, is a 2,500 gold item with health and AP only, and Grievous Wounds, obviously. So there's no more flat magic pen. It's no longer that item that you build, you know, to give you a bit more burst early, like as a bridge item after your first purchase. So you just sit on it. You no longer do that. You build it if you need Grievous Wounds. Pretty nice if you can build it early to just stop a big healer that you're laning against or something. And then the Nomicon, I believe, if you're under 50% health, if your opponent rather is under 50% health, the Grievous Wounds amplifies to 60% instead of 40. So yeah, all in all, pretty good that mages can now access Grievous Wounds for much less gold. And then Seeker's Armguard, same item, still builds into Zanya's. I just wanted to highlight this one because I feel like especially when I've played mages against assassins, it felt really bad because of the price point. Now it's 900 gold. It's a cheaper item, it's less armor, and more AP up front, and then it's the same armor when fully stacked and less 5 AP. Overall, I feel like this is a better item. I think it's a pretty good change for mages to be able to buy this item and just sit on it when playing against AD assassins. And yeah, just the price point makes the back timings less awkward. Then there's Spell Shroud, which is a new item. It's 1,200 gold. I assume the item icon is temporary, obviously, because it looks like a Negatron Cloak, and Negatron Cloak is still in the game. But yeah, 25 ability power, 25 magic resist, and then it has a passive that increases your magic resist up to 15 more after every 60 seconds or when you take damage. I didn't test this enough, so I'm not sure if this like resets when you're out of combat for too long, but still, pretty good item. 1,200 gold. This builds into Banshee's Veil, and I think it's the only item it builds into. But again, mages didn't really have an MR item they could sit on. You could sit on Negatron Cloak, but you couldn't really build it into anything you wanted. You could build a Null Magic Mantle and then wait for Banshees, or you could just go Mercs, right? And now you can actually like sit on this without having, because sometimes you just want the MR and you don't want the Tenacity, so you don't really want Mercs. You can now just build Spell Shroud, and it's pretty good to sit on. I was laning Victor against Akali, and I was having a bit of trouble, probably because I was playing on high ping as well, but sitting on this felt pretty good, and pretty good new item. And then another new item is Void Crystal, which builds into Void Staff. It makes the build path of the item much better now, in my opinion. Like before, you build Blasting Wand, you build Amp Tome, and then you're just sitting there, and it's just flat AP, and it's a bit more awkward, and you can build this now, and you get AP, and you get a bit of percentage magic penetration, so you're not in that huge power trough when you're playing against MR stacking. You're not in that huge power trough until you finish Void, so this is pretty good. So overall, like these little changes to component items seem pretty nice for mages. Now lastly, there's the new jungle items. Basically, the jungle system is changing. Before, you built Machete, you built Talisman on your starting items, and then those you upgraded those into items, like the jungle items, like the blue or the red, which gave you the smite, and then you would enchant them. Now, instead, you have Doran's Forge Heart and Doran's Hail Seed. It's a mix of both Machete and Talisman. It only has Talisman's burn instead of the on-hit damage from Machete, but this is all you need to buy as a jungler. After smiting 5 times, the item disappears from your inventory and gives you Challenging or Chilling Smite, depending on which item you chose. The enchants, Warrior, Cinderhull, Runic Echoes, and whatever the other one was, Devour, Bloodrazor, no one built that anyways. Those are gone, which means junglers now have to go for the mythic items that are quite expensive. As it stands, and on paper, this seems like a nerf to me because jungle gold income is the same as before. So what's happening here is you now have to go for mythics, and we'll cover mythics in another video, mythic items, but you have to go for pretty expensive mythic items, like that are more expensive than Warrior or Cinderhulk or Runic Echoes, that were pretty big spikes. Warrior and Runic Echoes especially were super huge spikes for junglers, and they were cheap items, especially if you were only considering the price of the enchant. Obviously now you're not putting in that gold that you were putting into the item. Now, naturally, before you were investing 1,000 gold for your Stalker's Blade or for your Skirmishes Saber, and now you're only investing 350, so that saves you 650 gold. But if you consider that, Warrior, which I think was the most expensive one of the enchants, was like 1,625 gold. Even if you add the 650, the 650 that you're saving there, it's still not enough for a mythic, right? So for most mythics anyways. So in terms of income, if the income doesn't change, junglers are going to feel a bit weaker early game. And obviously this is me theorizing, this is still preseason, this might still change. But the way I see it is either supportive junglers like Ivern come back as they have access to cheaper mythics, or tank junglers and they go something like Locket. It's an interesting item now. It's a bit like Runic Bulwark. Again, I'll talk about that in the tank itemization video. Or you have certain power farm junglers that rush Trinity Force like Hecarim. They were already skipping the enchant. Like they didn't want Cinderhulk. They just wanted the smite the combat smite, and sometimes they were even skipping that. They were just sitting on talisman. So now they can just sit on talisman. It upgrades for them. They get the combat smite, and then they just build into Trinity Force. So those are gonna feel I think nice, the farming ones, and then the low income ones are gonna feel nice. But otherwise, it's gonna feel a bit awkward to me, I guess, until you get that first spike, which is gonna come later. So I assume junglers are gonna be a bit weaker unless income is changed. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I think I'm already talked about it way too much. I already went way too long into this video, and I'll be doing 3 other videos. I'll probably do like tanks plus supports, and then AP separately because there's mana and non-mana, and then probably AD with fighters and assassins. That might be the longest one because there's a lot of items, but those kind of mix between each other sometimes. So I'll split it into 3. So look out for those over the next couple of hours or days. We'll see how fast I am. Peace.